George Lucas is one of the greatest and most influential directors to ever work in the medium of film.
Jar Jar is a key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
Not only was he responsible for creating the film that launched the biggest science fiction franchise of all time, but he was also the man who pioneered the development of digital film editing, digital cinematography, and digital projection, which, isn't a huge deal. He just helped develop the fundamental elements of modern cinema. Attack of the Clones was the first major blockbuster film shot entirely in a digital format. Star Wars Episode II revolutionized filmmaking. Just think about that for a second. Honestly, looking back now, one could argue that Lucas only made Star Wars films as an excuse to make multi-million-dollar tech demos. Man, I really want to shoot something on my new fancy digital cinema camera. Oh well, I guess I'll make another Star Wars movie. Although Lucas is a celebrated director who still receives mountains of praise even today, he has one infamous cinematic habit that people continue to pick on. George Lucas loves to go back to his finished films and change them. The changes that George Lucas made to the original trilogy with the special editions have already been talked about so much that most people's ears start to bleed whenever they hear the words special edition. I already have 2 videos on this very channel discussing the special editions, so if you want to hear my thoughts on them, go and check out those videos. Lucas didn't just stop with the special editions either. He continued to change the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy with their home video releases until he sold Lucasfilm to Disney in 2012. If you want to hear about the changes that Lucas made to the prequel films, then you can also check out the video I did on that as well. But let's not forget, Lucas did in fact make more movies that weren't Star Wars. I know, shocking, right? So how many more movies beyond Star Wars did Lucas change after the fact? Well, just one. But for this one, Lucas went all the way back to the beginning. Lucas always claimed that his intention behind making these special editions was to update the original trilogy so that they became the movies he wanted to make at the time, but couldn't due to the technical limitations of the era. So it makes sense that the only other film Lucas went back to and changed after his Star Wars movies was his small budget feature-length debut film, THX 1138 from 1971. THX 1138 began its life as a short student film written and directed by Lucas called Electronic Labyrinth THX 1138 4EB that he made in 1967. Going back and watching the short now is more of a history lesson than anything else. It's a very bare bones piece, but that's expected considering it is a student short film made decades ago. The short takes us to a dystopian future where we follow the protagonist THX 1138 4EB as they attempt to escape from their tyrannical government. The short does showcase Lucas's skill with a camera and his talent for developing interesting concepts, but I mostly find the short valuable because it's fascinating to see the beginnings of the director who would ultimately go on to direct Revenge of the Sith. I guess you can learn a lot in a few decades. In 1971, Lucas took his short film and fully realized it as a feature-length film. Just like the short, Lucas wrote and directed it, and this time thanks to Francis Ford Coppola producing the feature due to a partnership with Coppola's production company American Zoetrope and Warner Brothers, Lucas had a feature-length budget to play with, which allowed him to further develop his story and bring in established actors such as Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasance. THX 1138 is an impressively strong directorial debut from George Lucas, who was only 25 years old at the time. Like the short, the film follows our protagonist, THX 1138, in a dystopian future where citizens with shaved heads are oppressed by android police and mandatory drugs that suppress emotions. Lucas cleverly fleshes out the simple concept from his original short with a feature-length runtime, and showcases the directorial skills that would eventually bring Star Wars to life. I'll admit, the film is a bit too slow and abstract at times, but THX's thought-provoking story and impressive practical filmmaking delivers an engaging film with a compelling concept. But upon delivering the film to Warner Brothers, the company was not pleased with Lucas's version of the film, mostly because the studio just didn't understand what the film was about. This caused the studio to cut segments out of the film and release a shortened version in cinemas. This is where our story really begins.
THX, they freaked out when they saw it, obviously took all their money back from the studio, tried to recut it, tried to shorten it. I said, you can't understand it anyway. Why are you trying to shorten it? It's not going to make it make any more sense. And, but they said, we can do it. I said, 5 minutes is not going to make a difference. Why do you want to do that? You know, I put my heart and soul in this thing, and to me, it means something. You know, you just come in here and whack a few fingers off and think there's nothing to it. And so I was really angry about that.
To make a long story short, while the film received positive reviews from critics, the film bombed hard. Lucas kept plugging away with his filmmaking and put out American Graffiti in 1973, and then he made Star Wars in 1977, and we all know that story. Due to the insane popularity of Star Wars, THX was actually re-released in cinemas in 77, with the footage restored that Warner Brothers had originally taken out of the film. Gee, I wonder what made them change their mind about George Lucas. This restored version was also later released on VHS and Laserdisc. After the madness of the special editions in 97, while Lucas was in the middle of making the Star Wars prequels in the early 2000s, he felt the time was right to revisit his first film and fully realize the picture as he had envisioned it in 1971. THX 1138 went through an extensive restoration process to create a new digital master of the film with enhanced video and audio. Lucas also went a step further and added new digital effects to the film. Wait a second, this is starting to sound familiar. Lucas released THX 1138, the George Lucas Director's Cut, on DVD in 2004, and later released the film on Blu-ray in 2010. Interestingly, this re-release led to the film's rating being changed from a PG to an R, meaning that THX is the only R-rated film that George Lucas has ever directed. I watched THX 1138 for the first time last year. It was the last film in George Lucas's filmography that I hadn't seen, so I felt I owed it to myself to watch the film. I bought the Director's Cut Blu-ray and sat down to watch it one night, and imagine my shock when the 1971 film I was watching abruptly cut to early 2000s CGI. Is this how people felt watching the special editions in 97? Ugh. I thought Lucas had just remastered the film and put some footage back in. I didn't know he made the special editions 2.0. It turns out that the digital effects that Lucas added to THX in the early 2000s were not simple visual fixes. Lucas changed and updated pretty much every single effect in the film. He updated the holograms, he pasted new digital effects on top of old scenes, he replaced practical effects with entirely CGI shots, and he added a CGI jerk-off sex machine. George, what are you trying to say here, buddy? Let's not let the audience appreciate the talent of the film crew for finding locations that conveyed a desolate and cold atmosphere of this future dystopia. Here's a million CGI cars instead. I feel like a massive hypocrite here because I'm one of those people who give these special editions a pass, but here I am flogging this movie for the same reasons. But to be fair, I feel like Lucas's meddling is much more noticeable in this film. At least Star Wars had a decent budget behind it, so it's not as big of a jump to put some CGI elements in a movie with a more modern feel, but putting 100% CGI sequences into this cheap movie from 1971 feels even more egregious. Once again, we are left to ask why Lucas did this. Did he make this director's cut despite Warner Brothers for taking his movie away from him in the first place, and once he got control back, he just went nuts?
Then they did the same thing in American Graffiti because they thought it was a terrible movie. They put it on the shelf, they cut it. They cut 5 minutes out, the magic number. I said, why would you do that? I said, it doesn't make any difference. They said, well, we did it because we can do it. And I got really upset. They put it on the shelf.
Maybe, but in reality, I'm sure that the reason Lucas changed THX was the same reason he had for making the special editions. He wanted to fully realize his film into the version he was unable to make in 1971. Is this version better than the original? Well, the picture and audio restoration looks great, and to be fair, Lucas's changes are only present for a small portion of the film's runtime, but goddamn, that 2000 CGI sticks out like a sore thumb, and it really makes you question whether you are watching a film from the 70s. I wanted to make this video because until I watched the movie and did my own research, I had never really seen anybody mention Lucas's alterations to THX 1138. Upon reading what other people thought about this updated version, I discovered that, surprise surprise, everyone else also hates this version of the film. And just like the original trilogy, the unaltered versions are forever trapped on VHS and Laserdisc. So yes, once again, Lucas went and made an inferior version of his own movie, which is now the only commercially available version of said movie. Love you, Georgie boy. You really are the best, mate. Ultimately, Lucas is the director here, and he has the right to change his films in any way he sees fit. And coming from someone who has dabbled in making short films of his own, I can't say I really blame the guy, but personally, I can't help but feel that Lucas totally destroyed the atmosphere of THX 1138 by digitally meddling with his impressive 1971 debut. Maybe I'm harder on this film because I didn't grow up with these digital effects like I did with the special editions. I'll be the first to admit that. The only thing I can be sure of is that I think I finally have somewhat of an understanding of what fans went through with the special editions in '97. Now I want to hear from you guys. Have you seen THX 1138? Do you hate the digital effects that Lucas added as much as I do? Do you think Lucas handled this movie better than the Star Wars special editions? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everybody. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. I'll see you all in the next video.